So today we're going to have a look at the logo range, just to get an idea and an understanding of what its capabilities are and what we can actually achieve with the system. And then we'll dive into the Logo Soft Comfort software, have a look at some of the mechanisms behind networking that we have for expanding our system out and distributing our architecture. And we will then also have a look at the logo web editor and how to produce our own web pages that we host down on the logo as well. And then finally, for those that are able to hang about, we'll be having a look into the future and seeing what that brings for the logo as a platform. So I think a lot of you, if you've ever seen my presentations around logo, will be familiar with these slides. The conventional methods of building an automation system typically consist of us wiring up the contacts and the coils of lots of individual devices, typically from different manufacturers, maybe different suppliers. And all of this leads to several layers of complexity, one with the amount of wiring that we can see there, maintaining schematics and so on, as never happens in my experience. And then also maintaining stocking levels of spare components from all of these different manufacturers and different suppliers, when we could actually start to rethink about our automation system and utilize a logo controller to replace all of those individual hardware components, save us a bit of space in the panel because of that, and also minimize on the wiring and thus the complexity within the hardware system. So any changes that any logical control that we want to now set up through the system, we do at a software level. So it makes it very easy and flexible to be able to change that logical path or introduce new functionality maybe at a later date. So just to go over some of the highlights, first of all, the software itself. You can install the software on any of the operating systems through Windows, Linux and Mac. So you've got good flexibility and the choice of use there of whichever system you prefer. And it is a piece of software that you can pretty much pick up and run with, albeit that there are lots of web-based training pages out there on our Siemens Industry Online Support site, as well as things like tutorial videos and a very active user forum there through the same Industry Online Support website. So definitely somewhere to have a look and get familiar with. We mentioned the space saving due to the reduction in the numbers of hardware components to turn into a more software-based solution, and that's saving us some of our steel work, and the fact that we may need to keep less stock items so that we, in the event of failures and things like that, we don't have so many components to take care of. The device itself is modularly expandable, so I'll just bring in my pointer. So just on the side of this base module here, so this is a CPU or a base module, we have this cover on the right hand side of the base module, and if we remove that with a small screwdriver, that then gives us access to connect the next module along onto the DIN rail, slide across the mechanical locking on the front of the module, and that also then makes the electrical connections form the backplane. So we can expand that out with a number of digital and analog I/O modules to really fit the size of the system that we're engineering at that time. The modules themselves are available for all the standard voltages, so 12, 24 volts up to 230 volts AC as well. And we also have optional modules there for sending and receiving SMS and emails, connecting into the global positioning satellite system so you can lock in on your location, and also for connection into the KNX building management system. So again, gives you good flexibility and maybe sort of gives some different ideas in the use of the logo and where we can apply its technology. You see on the front there, we've got the integrated display. So this display comes along with the keypad, as you can see there, for navigation through the menus, maybe even little program changes and parameterization of some of the functions, maybe timers and counters, that sort of thing. It can all be locked down with a password. so people can't change the program without the correct authorizations. And we can also push alarm messages up onto this screen from within the user program and change the backlight of that screen to indicate a warning or an alarm with an amber or a red backlight, as well as a white backlight that you can use for illuminating it. Maybe if this is sat in the back of a darkened panel, we can have a means there of illuminating that screen as well. So again, just gives us some different ideas and uses around the logo device itself. A few more highlights. This is probably the best one out of the lot, is the capability in terms of communication with the logo. So we've had for a number of years now an Ethernet interface on the logo and the capability to network them together over an Ethernet network. So this is what we can see here in this top box. Logo to logo communications. That can happen in a couple of ways, and we'll have a look at the two main ways of achieving that and when we get into the live demo. So we can initiate this style of communication with a single logo as a master and then a further 8 subordinate slave devices. So they're the same physical piece of hardware, but through the menu we activate the slave mode on the logo. And that means it doesn't run a user program, but we have direct access to its inputs and its outputs of the direct base module and its expansion over the Ethernet network back to the main controller. And we can have up to 8 slaves on the network. Now, we've also got the option of master-to-master comms. So we can have, again, up to 9 logos all on a network, all cross-communicating with each other, with maybe sharing set point information or passing on the status of their particular task within a machine. And that again gives us some more flexibility in the architecture, because now we can start to think about, rather than running the tray work down the side of a factory and lots of multi-core cables to pull signals back from down one end of a plant room back to where the logo is situated in the control panel, we can now maybe hop onto an existing Ethernet network, or maybe even just install an Ethernet cable rather than lots of multi-cores, and pull all of that information back over the Ethernet system instead. So again, gives us more flexibility and maybe a little bit more cost saving when we come to look at the architecture. We can also connect up to our HMIs. So if you want nice visualization with clean, crisp graphics and all the benefits that come along with the basic and comfort HMIs, we can set up connections directly down to a logo using the included logo driver in WinCC. And we also have connectivity out to our S7 controllers using the S7 communications protocol. So put and get from an S7 1200, for instance, and we can then start to read and write values to and from the logo. As an alternative to that, and a means of gaining access to the outside world via third-party communications, we've also got the Modbus TCP/IP capabilities. So you can initiate client or server comms with Modbus TCP to communicate out to, I don't know, maybe energy meters, or even to utilize Modbus in its true form as its original design as a protocol for initiating remote I/O communications. So as an example, an S7 1200 sat as the main controller over a network can then communicate down using Modbus TCP to a number of logos down on a lower level network that maybe then have some individual tasks or gather some sensor information in to push back up to us as the main controller in the 1200. So again, good flexibility and use and integration into the wider third-party systems out there. Now, we've got data logging capabilities in the logo, so they're typically executed from the user program, but that has a slight downside to it in that when you want to retrieve the log files, you've got to use the Logo Soft Comfort software and you've got to put the logo into stop. So at that point, you would lose control of your machine. If you have your logo connected to an Ethernet network and somewhere on that network is a PC, as long as Excel's installed onto that PC, we can install the add-in to Excel, the PC access tool, and that then will pull data from the logo and populate that into an Excel spreadsheet as live values, or you can slightly adjust that syntax and also log that data into CSV files directly on the hard drive of the PC. So obviously they're then available to you so that you can copy and paste them off onto a USB stick or whatever it is that you need to do without affecting the operation of the logo, because there's no interaction there at that point with the logo. We've just read the data and stored it in the files on the PC. And then, of course, we're talking about lots of communications tasks here and linking up different PLCs and different controllers and HMIs. When we have a diagnostic event occur within the system, makes a lot more use to the engineer if the alarming information has timestamps and that all of the timestamps are synchronized across the system. Then we can look at that alarming information and diagnose chronologically the sequence of events and work out what caused the problem in the first place. And that's why we employ time synchronization, so we can utilize the NTP time protocol to synchronize clocks of logos with other devices or even just within a network of logo. The display itself, we can see there on the front. We also have a remote display, an external logo text display. So it's the same look and feel as the display on the front of the logo, except it's got an extra 4 characters in width. It still has the same effects with the background colors, so that we can change the background color from the user program. But it also has a set of 4 function keys. You can use those in the user program, so they can set bits and do various tasks within the control system. And we've also got a 2-port Ethernet switch built onto the back of the TDE as well. Obviously they're giving you means to connect the logo into one port and then a programming device or the wider network. Logo Soft Comfort version 8 came along with 2 programming modes. Single mode, which is the traditional sense of the older Logo Soft Comfort versions. You program up your logo, you download that single program, and it runs in the logo controller. If you want to network more than one logo together, it is still possible in single diagram mode, but you've got to engineer that in, and we will touch on that slightly when we have a look at the configuration later. We also have, though, the network mode, and the network mode gives us an overview of all of the logos together in a single project. We can access all of the program files from those logos, and they're all stored within a single file. So you've now not got to manage individual program files, tying communications between different controllers manually. We can use some nice drag and drop features that we've got in the software there to set that up. So we'll have a look at that as well. We've got the integrated web server, so it comes in 2 styles. There's a standard web server, which is our Siemens branded web server. It has 2 pages, one that looks like the front of the logo, so you can push all the messages through onto the web server as well. And also a page that looks like the logo text display. There's then a further page which gives you free access into a table where you can put any address from within the logo, and then you can monitor and modify that value as you wish. Maybe a good tool there for commissioning. And then the second web server is our user web server. So you can design your own HTML web pages, download those onto the memory card that's stored in front of the logo under this flap here. And then you can access by tapping in the IP address of the logo in Internet Explorer or Google Chrome, for example. You can then access those web pages over the network. So, of course, if you've got remote access to your network, you then can have remote access via your web pages. And the key point here is there's no HTML knowledge required. So we issue a free tool, the Logo Web Editor. We'll have a look at that as well later on. That uses a what you see is what you get format, so you drag and drop objects into an editor field and then you tag the addresses up via drop down menus. So it's very easy to generate these web pages without any special programming knowledge. Now, if you are HTML confident and you want to dive into there and have a look what's going on, all that the tool does is wrap up everything that you build and generate HTML5 code for you, so you can have a look into there and edit away to your heart's content to really give your web pages some tailored content. And I mentioned there under this flap here, there's a micro SD card slot. So it's just a standard SD card formatted to FAT32. And that has a number of functions. So the first thing that we can do is use it for uploading and downloading programs. So if you have a customer at site maybe, and you need to make a program modification, but you can't get access, so something that could potentially happen in these times, you can download the program onto a logo locally in your office with an SD card fitted, tick the box to say send it to the SD card when you're in the download window, and then put the SD card in the post, and the customer can then load the program directly off the card into the logo through the menu. So maybe a bit of a get out of jail free card, hey, get out of jail card there for you. We can also use that memory card for data logging. So when we're using the program function to log data, it logs data into the internal memory of the logo or onto the SD card if we fitted it, and it logs that data as CSV files. So you've got up to the capacity of the card. The limits are specified in the manual, and also password protection, so we can lock that down so that people can't access the files on there as well. You can see there the temperature range, -20 to +55, so a really wide applicative area for temperature there. Maybe in the sort of freezer and refrigeration environments, we can start to think about mounting controls in different areas to save us a bit of money, maybe on running cables long distances and things like that, and all the way up to +55. So just quickly, some of the software highlights, which I think the main one for me is the fact that we're now utilizing Ethernet communications. A lot of users maybe aren't very confident in going into the Windows Ethernet port configuration and changing IP addresses and then losing their internet connections and things like this. So we've sort of hijacked a bit of the tier portal here, and there's now the automatic setting of the IP addresses. So when you download or attempt to download or upload to or from a logo, there's a sniff button there, so you can hit this refresh button and it'll browse the network, read back the addresses of the devices on that subnet, and then it'll temporarily assign an IP address that's free on the network and compliant with that subnet rule, so that you can then communicate from LogoSoft on your laptop down to the device for programming. So it really makes the task of getting online that much easier. I remember when I first started on the help desk in Manchester, a lot of the calls were, how do I get communications to the logo controller, using the old cable that we used to have, the 232 and the USB RS485 cable. So this really does go to ease that to some extent. We've mentioned the access tool that embeds into Excel, so you can live archive your data directly in run mode of the logo. We've talked a little bit about single and network mode of the software. We'll have a look at that in more detail as we move on. But if you want to have a go of it, then you can download the demo software for free. It's available from siemens.com/logo. About halfway down the page, you'll see a link there, and you can download that demo software. It's got all the functionality of the full version, but you just don't have any online connection. So you wouldn't be able to download a program to a logo, for instance. However, there's a built-in simulator that you can use, so you can simulate your program, even network configurations, and we'll have a quick look at that again in the demo in a moment. And of course, the free web editor tool. So this is the tool that creates your HTML pages without you being a HTML programmer. So again, really useful. Get it downloaded and have a play with it and see what you think about that. There are good reasons that I'm focusing around the web editor tool, which I'll come back to at the back end of the presentation. So just quickly to make you aware of what's available, we have 4 base modules or CPUs that come with the screen and keypad. They all have 8 digital inputs and 4 digital outputs. If you see an R below the device, that means those digital outputs are relays, and they're rated up to 10 amps, as we can see over here on the right hand side. And the number before that indicates the supply voltage and the digital input voltage. So here we've got 12 or 24 volts DC, 24 volt AC DC, 24 volt AC DC with a relay output, and a 230 volt version with relay outputs. Now on the 24 volt DC versions, you have the ability to switch 4 of the digital inputs over to be used as 0 to 10 volt analog inputs. So that again gives real good flexibility in the system and a really cost-effective way of getting analog signals from sensors into the logo, so that you've got them available to your control system or up to the web pages, or maybe up to somewhere else, as we'll have a look later on. We've then below got exactly the same devices, but they don't have the screen and the keypad on the front, so you have to have the software to be able to configure these and to use them. And then we have a range of input and output modules. So firstly, we have the DM16 family, 8 inputs and 8 outputs, various voltage ranges for 24 volts, 230 volts with relay outputs and transistor outputs, and then a range of DM8s that have 4 ins and 4 outs. Then we have 0 to 10 volt, 0 or 4 to 20 milliamp analog inputs. That's a 2-channel module. And here actually on the front, that's the slider that we slide across to lock into the base module or the next module along. So you push your screwdriver in and slide that to the left and it locks into place. Next module we have is a temperature module for RTD, PT100 and PT1000 temperature sensors. And then we have a 0 to 10 volt, 0 4 to 20 milliamp analog output module. Additionally, we have the CMR module. So this is a device that we can use for sending and receiving text messages or emails. We connect this back to the logo using an Ethernet cable. And then from the logo, we can control the function within those text messages and react to them as well. So again, really useful expansion to the logo system. We fit a SIM card into the slot on the front. We fit an aerial here to connect to the telephone system. And then we have another aerial point that connects to the global positioning satellite system. So if you've got mobile kit or rentable items that you use these for, then you can send text messages to find out where they are. You can also fire outputs from here or the logo via a text message, so you could lock down a system and things like that. So you've got good control over your asset. We then have an Ethernet switch, the CSM or compact switch module. It has 4 ports. And this is a junction box for Ethernet. We plug all the devices in. As long as they've all been addressed correctly, then they should all be able to communicate through there. So we have a port on the front and then a further 3 ports on the underside that we can access via the trunking within a panel. We then have the CMK2000 module. So this is for integration into the KNX building management system. So this device connects again via an Ethernet connection back to the logo. We can then take control of any KNX device that's connected onto this terminal here via a 2-wire bus system. So this would connect potentially around a building. We then configure this as the master to the KNX devices, which could be light fittings, light switches, humidity sensors, light sensors, all these sort of smart building devices. And we can utilize the control of those directly from within the logo. Now, when we've got a web page stuck on the top of that, then it gives us remote access potentially into the building control system. So very useful device again. And then last but not least, we have the logo power. So designed in conjunction with the logo, but that's not to say that it can't just be used as a standard power supply elsewhere. It provides 24 volts or 12 volts, depending upon the version that you select. And then you can see there are a range of current outputs that we've got available, starting off at just 0.6 of an amp. The 0.6 and 0.9 amp versions are only 18 mil wide, so they're really compact power supplies. If you've not got a lot of space in the panel, they again don't need any lateral clearance, so heat dissipation is always vertical, so we can mount devices directly up to the sides of the power supplies without any problems there with heat or anything like that. So again, a real flexible solution for power supplies into the logo system. So just a quick recap on some of the benefits. We've got 8 basic modules. All of them have Ethernet connectivity built in. And all of them have integrated web server capabilities, and that allows us not only to communicate with our own S7 systems, but also for remote control and monitoring via the web pages. We have the extended temperature range through the standard product line from -20 up to +55, as well as NTP client and server capabilities for time synchronization of alarm data, etc. Integrated Modbus TCP/IP protocols as client or server gives us again good flexibility for integrating into a wider third-party network or talking to third-party devices, or even, as we mentioned, up to an S7-1200 as a remote I/O solution there. Logo Access Tool gives us the capability to read data from the logo while the logo stays in run, and then store that data as an archived CSV file on a connected PC. And then we've got finally the logo web editor, which is our free tool for configuring HTML web pages without any knowledge of HTML programming. So we're going to have a jump in now to the software, into the Logo Soft Comfort. So you can see that I've got a program that's been written here. It's all stored within my network project. So you can see I've got my logo in the network view above. It's got a connection to my PC. It's got a configured IP address. and we then have the program that's associated with that main controller displayed below. It's just a really simple program. It's got a couple of inputs for starting and stopping via a latching relay that triggers a delay timer of 3 seconds and then turns on an output to run a motor or whatever it is that we want to do. Now, I want to expand this out and start to use some of the networking features because I have several motors on this machine and I want them all to start and stop at, relatively the same time. Maybe I've got a bit of a conveyor system or something like that. So I've got my main controller here. If I just simulate the program for you to see exactly what happens, you can see that it's now turned blue, indicating that we've got an online view and everything's off. If I push the input one push button here, you can see it turns red where we have a true signal, the timer times, and the output then times on until we press the stop. I'll just trigger that again so you can see the timer timing, the output comes on, and then we can reset the latch. So real simple bit of code. I'm going to come out of simulation and now I'm going to add in my second controller that's going to have its own program running its own sequence of events down the other end of the factory, but I also need to run this part of the conveyor at the same time as well. So I'm going to now add in a new device. I pick the latest one in the list because that's the latest version that I have available to me, and I'm going to give it a name. Names are a sensible thing to get into using, so it just makes the tasks, as we see in a moment when we use some of the instructions, it makes things a lot clearer when we come to configuring these connections. So I'll just call this second controller. I'm happy with the IP address. I'm going to take out the gateway because I don't have one, and I'm going to click then OK. And you can see then that the second controller now gets added onto my network. There's a green line here showing that they're connected up via Ethernet. We can see the IP address, and then we have below it the second controller programs open. So this just shows we've got controller program number 1, and then we've got our second controller program here. Now, if I use the taskbar here and split the screen, I can take one of these programs and drop it onto the other half of the window. Just drag that over so you can see a little bit clearly what's going on. Pull this in. So here we've got our program and we've got our second empty program over on the right hand side. So I want now, when this first motor locally runs, I want to also send a signal over to the second controller to say turn on your output number 1 as well and run your motor at the same time. So to do that, I'm going to take my output instruction from the instruction set over here on the left, drag that over into the second controller. We'll just zoom in a bit there so we can see what's happening. And I want it to be turned on when this timer expires. So I take the output of the timer and I drag it across into the second program and drop it onto the output. That now has done a number of things. So firstly, it's dropped an extra line in to our network view. That tells you that these two controllers, even though we're connected by Ethernet, it doesn't necessarily mean we're talking to each other. When we see the blue line connecting the controllers, this means they have a logical connection configured and they are set up to talk to each other. You can see there's a limited number of squares there. Clue there is that the number of squares is the number of logos that I can communicate with. So you can see that each one has 8 squares available and can therefore communicate with a further 8 logos. There are ways to communicate to further logos, but we're not going to cover that in today's session. So that's just to explain what's going on in the top half of the window. Down in the program, as I dropped the instruction on the output, we saw these 2 green instructions appear. And these are the network outputs and the network inputs. And you can get these manually from this network folder here on the left-hand side. There we have our network input and our network output. If I double click on the network output just to have a look at what's going on inside there, we can see that we have a remote device that we're going to write the value to, and here in the drop down we can now pick the controller. So because our controller is in the same project, we can see that the second controller is available there from the drop down. We then need to just pick the block type, whether it be a network input, output, whatever it may be, and the block number. So we could actually, in a single diagram mode, take one of these network output instructions. Instead of picking our controller, which we wouldn't have the option to, we type in the IP address of our other logo controller, and then we tell it which input output it is that we want to utilize within the system, and that then manually sets up that connection. And then you can start to see why having a network project makes it so much easier, because we've not even needed to access this configuration. We just dragged from the timer, dropped to the output, and it dropped in the required instructions for us. Now, I'll just have a look again in the network input on the opposite side of the connection. Very similar, you can pick the device that you want to read the value from and the address, etc., as we saw in the opposite end. But the reason that I've opened this is just to show you this diagnostic function. So you can add yourself into your program a network input, tick this diagnostics box in the parameters, and then from the drop down you've got a number of errors that you can diagnose. So for example, an Ethernet error, we've got a link, somebody's pulled the Ethernet cable out or cut through it, a module has been changed, the SD card's got a read-write error, there's no card present, or the SD card's full. So if you're doing data logging, it might be a good idea to drop this in and give yourself a little message that pops up on the front of the logo and says the SD card is full. So again, bit of flexibility and robustness within the system there. So now, just delete that. Now that we've got this network output configured and the network input that was very simply done by a drag and drop, I want to test this configuration now. So we just simulated when we were testing the initial program. So I am now going to, again, simulate that same program. You can see it's changed color and we've got the simulation bar open at the bottom. But now this time I'm going to click into the second controller diagram and click the simulate button as well. And now what we have are both devices being simulated at the same time. Until I just did that. Being simulated at the same time. And therefore now when I start my push button, the timer time's ready to turn on the output here, but it also turns on the output in the opposite program as well. So we've tested everything in terms of configuration, the logic in the user programs all sound before we even hit site, and then we know that if there is a problem with communications, it's going to be in a configuration setting of the logo device itself, i.e. the IP address is wrong, or there's going to be some other issue with the network. It's not going to be my program. I know it works because I've simulated it and I've tested it. So we'll just come out of simulation now. That covers the master comms. It really is that easy. You pick up the point in one program where you want to take a signal from, and you drop it at a point in the second program where you want to take the signal to, and that is communications between two masters in a logo. Now we also have communications between the master and the slave. Again, really simple to do. In slave mode, remember, we don't have a user program inside the slave. It just acts as a dumb I/O device. So we can read and write to its inputs and its outputs directly from, for example, our main controller here. You set that setting in the configuration on the logo through the keypad, or through Logo Soft Comfort you can access it through the properties and set that up. So once it's set into slave mode, you literally give it an IP address and tell it which master it's allowed to communicate with. So we're going to add one into the configuration. We add the new device again. We can have a look down our hardware catalog and see we've got a folder of slaves at the bottom. We'll pick the latest one in the list because that's the latest version. I'm going to give it name slave. I'm okay with the IP address. Again, I'm just going to drop that gateway out and click OK. So you can again see it's dropped the device in. It looks slightly different though. So we again get the green connection indicating it's connected onto the same network. We can see what IP address we've got configured here, but we only get one square. And that's because a slave can only communicate with one master at a time. So you can't have one slave reporting back to two masters or anything like that. Once one master is communicating with the slave, it's his and his alone. To configure the connection, we looked and saw that these network input and outputs were dropped in automatically if we were dragging between user programs, but because we don't have a program in the slave device, we've got to manually pull in the network instructions. So we'll pull that in and drop it. Sorry, didn't want the input, I wanted a network output. And what I'm going to do is again use this slave to turn on a motor further on down the conveyor line. So I'll connect it up to the timer so that it's got its logical trigger, double click it to access the parameters, and then it's just simply a case of selecting remote device, which remote device I want to communicate with, that's my slave, and I want to turn on output number 1, 2, 3, whichever one I select. Click OK. You can see it turns green because the configuration is valid. And we've now configured the master-slave communications. So this is the really nice thing about the comms in Logo. It's very simple and very easy and very clear. Once you're in the user programs, you can see network output 2 is talking to slave output number 1. Network output 1 is talking to the second controller at its network input number 1, and we can clearly see network input number 1 here in the second controller. So really nice way of setting up the communications across your network. So that's networks. The next step that I wanted to implement was to provide some web page functionality. So here we've got our start stop locally from push buttons on the panel. But I want to OR those in so that I can use a bit from a web page, have a button on a web page, click that button and start and stop my process from there. I also want to monitor the status of this local motor and also how much time's timing in the timer. So I'm going to use all of these items as objects in my web page. But before we do that, there are a couple of things that we need to do. So the first one, I'm going to pick up a memory flag. So this is a bit within the Logo controller that I can use as a digital signal, for example, from a web page. So you can see I've already symbolized that up as a web page start button. Connect that into my OR block just simply by drag and drop. I also want the same for the stop circuit. So I'll drag and drop those in. And now I have two buttons potentially that I can then code up in the web page to turn on and turn off this motor. We can access the output directly in the Logo web editor, so we don't need to do anything there. But the timer you can't access directly. We have to use what's called parameter mapping. So that takes any parameter from within inside a timer, the delay time, the time that's actually timing, and so on and so forth, the elapsed time, and presents it to us in a memory area within the Logo that's accessible from the outside world. And we access that table through the Tools menu and parameter VM mapping. So in here you can see I've already got my timer configured to push the current time into word 0 of the variable memory. And I've also set up the same timer to take the on delay set point to word 2 of the variable memory. So when we look at this in the web editor, we'll be looking for VW0 and VW2 to pull these values from the Logo and display them in the web page. To do that display, we switch over into the Logo web editor. So this is, again, it's a free tool. You can download it off the Industry Online Support site and have a play with it. I've made a start to my configuration here by adding in a button. So just to show you around, this is our home page, the top left-hand side. If we have more, add more pages in, you'll see them there, and we can then set up the navigation between them. We've got a component tool chest below with things that we can use for drawing objects, displaying text or hyperlinks, displaying digital values, displaying analog values, and then the various times that we've got available. So it gives us all access to all of the stuff that we have inside of a Logo. Now the object that I've got here is actually a digital value. We'll pull one in a minute and configure it from fresh. But just to show you some of the properties of that, over on the right hand side, we have to pick the address that we want that button to control. And we made the start push button M1. So there we've picked M from the drop down, and the first one there available is M1. I've ticked the box to make it writable so that when I push the button it sends the value down to the Logo. And then I've just configured, using these browse buttons here, an image for on and an image for off. So if I click the browse buttons, just to give you an idea, included within Logo, the Logo web editor, you get this graphical library. So throughout here there are various things that you can pick out and use for free. Or if you come down to the bottom, you've got My Graph, and if you click the Upload Files button there, you can upload any of your own graphics, take them out of Photoshop, whatever tools you want to use, download libraries off the internet, import them into the tool here, and they're available. As you can see, I've got my graphic library that I've got set up here. So it's just a case of dragging in the digital value, picking the address, making it writable or not, and then what image do you want displayed. So we'll just quickly, we'll copy this and paste it in so that we can set up our stop button. Our stop button resides on memory bit 2. We still want it to be writable, but we want to change the off image here from being an on green button to an off red button, because that's going to be the button we press to stop the motor. I also want to display the status of the motor. That would be useful. Like when I press the stop button, has it worked? So again, we'll bring in a digital value, and we'll do this one from scratch. So you can see you could just simply change the text in the on field and the off field and have it displaying text based upon the varying state of the bit that we monitor in the PLC. And you can see there that can be an input. We've actually got our motor connected to our output, so I'll monitor output 1. I don't want to make this writable, I just want to display it, so I'm not going to tick that box, but I don't want any words to be displayed. So I'm just going to delete those. Instead, I'm going to pick some images. So for the on image, I'm going to come down to my library again, and when it's running, I want it to be green, and when it's not running, I want it to be red. So we've picked those colours there. Now we also had a timer in there, and it'd be really useful to be able to see how much time we've got left. So I'm going to do this by bringing in a couple of objects. Firstly, an analog bar. Now the time in the logo, you'll see 3 numbers coming back in a moment. So 300, for example, would be 3 seconds, and the second 2 digits would be the hundredths of a second, and that mimics the setting inside Logosoft for the timer. So it might look a little bit strange initially until you get used to it, but again, you can take this HTML program file and then apply your own scalings in the code itself if you want to. So I'm just going to change this here for the bar graph properties to be reading from VW 0. That's going to display the timer as it's timing. I'm going to display it up to, I'll put 1,000 in there, and you'll see why when we get the timer timing. As well as that, on the bar graph, I can start to do some pretty jazzy things. So I can change some of the colours depending upon the number range that's being exhibited there. So it'll change colours as we increase or decrease the value, so you can indicate alarm set points and thresholds and things like that. We'll save that, and you can then obviously just change the borders there. So I'm also going to just display that value, so I'll drag in the analog value now rather than an analog bar. Again, I want it to be VW0 because I want to display that as a number now. You can, if it's, for example, temperature or weight or distance, you can start to apply units directly at the I/O field there as well, which is quite a nice touch. And I could make it writable, but this field in a timer, it isn't writable anyway, so we can't tick that box. What I'm also going to do, though, is make the preset available to us so we can adjust the timer from our web page. That's quite a useful feature to adjust the timer from the web page. So in here, the preset, if you remember, was in VW2. So I click the little box at the side, set VW2. I want to make it writable, and that then is my page done. So I've configured a start button and a stop button to the 2 memory bits. I've picked up the status of the output to display a red or a green motor. I've got a bar chart that's going to go up or down depending upon the timer value, and then we're displaying that numerically along with being able to set the preset. So what does this actually look like? Well, we'd have to download it into the logo. To do that, you do need an SD card formatted to FAT32, fitted in the front slot of the logo. So that's where all the imagery and the graphics and the HTML files that this tool generates are stored. If you don't have a memory card fitted, it won't let you download it. And we just use these download buttons here. So we can now flip over into the live web page, and you can see that here. So I'll just actually go back to the login page and show it you from the beginning. So this is the front home page, if you like, of the standard web server. So at the point with version 8.2 that we're currently at, you have to access your own bespoke pages still via this screen here. So we can enter the password that we have configured in the logo, and then tick this box to customize site. So one of the benefits with the next release that we'll come to very shortly is that you will be able to bypass this page effectively and go directly into one of your own branded pages, and we'll show you a little bit around that. So I'm going to log into the customized site. And here you can see now I've got my live connection from the web page down on the logo. I can click my start button and you can see the timer value increasing through the bar chart and then the status of my motor change. I can then press my stop button and stop that, which resets the timer. And then remember we assigned the delay set point, so I can increase this. I'll put, I don't know, something 750, so that would be 7.5 seconds. It's quite easy to get your head around. I'll press the go button again. And you can see now as the bar chart increases and crosses the various thresholds that we configured, it's changing colour dynamically and the motor comes on. So really simple, using a free tool, no effort in terms of programming, learning and understanding. You can pick the tool up and use it. There is a free web tutorial around the use of the web editor tool as well, so you can make use of that at a later date from the Industry Online support site. So that brings us back into our presentation. So we've had a look at the logo networks using master slave and master master and the nice drag and drop functionality and the drop down menus that we've got there to build up our network. And then we had a quick look at building a very simple web page that sat on top of our control system so that we can access that across the network from a mobile device, for example. And that brings us then on to the next stage. So before we move on to that, it's useful to have a look at where we've come from. So back in 1996 is when we launched the product. It's changed a lot since then in that we've modularized our rack build-up. So you've got more flexibility within your automation system. We've increased the number of functions that we've got available within the software and increased the performance throughout the range of logos during this period of time, including new functionality at software such as the PI controller and new functionality at hardware such as an external display. We then introduced Ethernet that gave us networking capabilities to broaden the distributed architecture of a logo installation. And then we see where we are at the current day with the logo version 8. It has the new display with the backlight colors, the integrated web servers and web pages we've just been looking at. We've got the new software with its improvements around networking and usability, and we've got capabilities to communicate via text messages, emails, and across KNX networks. So a real continual development stream all the way through the product life cycle, and that really leaves the question with what's next. And that's where we bring the logo to the cloud. So now for the same price as the standard logo, all of the logos as of version 8.3 will be able to be connected into the Amazon Web Services cloud system. So that's the first release step, the AWS. We can have a look at that in a little bit more detail. So firstly, I think that cloud services, cloud functionality, cloud analytics is all something that we've been speaking about and hearing about for quite a long time now, particularly when we relate that into our wider controller portfolio and our IPC and industrial comms networks. So this is all sort of standard jargon and standard language that we're used to talking about with these types of controllers. And it's been something that the logo really, I think, has been crying out for, is this connectivity up to the cloud. So once the version 8.3 is released at the back end of this year, then we will then be able to connect logo devices directly up into Amazon Web Services. And that gives us a few key features. So the first thing, we get to utilize the cloud services. So now messaging, push messages through to your mobile devices, alarming, visualization, analyzing of data, data archiving, all these sorts of things are all available through your existing Amazon cloud services. You can visualize the data in the cloud through using those cloud services and the tools that they've got. But if you prefer, you can then use the Logo Web Editor version 2. So at the same time as we launch the 8.3 hardware, we will also be releasing the Logo Web Editor version 2, which enables you to build dashboards in the same way as we've just built our web pages. There's just a slight change in the way that you address the object. So one of the drop downs changes and you get an extra item in there to pick a cloud tag. And then you can store that web editor project and upload it into Amazon, therefore gaining access to your control system wherever you've got access from your Amazon account. So you can be anywhere in the world and have direct access into that control system, and all that you've had to do at the logo end is connect it onto the internet and make sure that it has an internet connection. Of course, connecting things onto the internet, security then becomes a concern. So security will be integrated into all of the version 8.3 base modules as standard. It uses MQTT as the protocol to communicate with the cloud over a TLS secure connection. So a secure connection there, giving you that added bit of confidence that nobody's going to be accessing your systems without your login credentials. And as I've mentioned, this cloud capability will be installed at the firmware level of all version 8.3 modules, the base modules, so you'll be able to maintain compatibility with all the existing expansion modules, which gives us a really good opportunity to upgrade machines and connect them to the cloud. So if you've got an existing machine or a design, but you think, cloud connectivity would be really good for me to be able to gather all of the data from my regional assets and view them in a single dashboard, all that you have to do is take out the existing logo-based module, upgrade the program to the latest 8.3, configure the new cloud functions, build yourself your web page, or if you've got one, change the tags over and then upload it into the cloud, and you're good to go. Your machine's there and available online with the Amazon cloud. Functions-wise, we mentioned we use the web editor to build our visualization for storage in the cloud, and we can gain the benefits of the user management that are enabled through Amazon and all of the additional cloud services. Usability-wise, it's a very simple configuration in Logosoft Comfort version 8.3 once that's released with the version 8.3 hardware. You'll get an extra tab of configuration in the properties of the logo where you'll be able to log into your Amazon account and register the logo as a thing on the internet, and then a further tab where you can map the data from things like the timers, as we just did, but push that into the cloud. So you just basically say, I want the timer to be available in the cloud, and it's this one, please. Tick the box and away you go. So real easy and simple configuration. Covers all use cases really. So if you are a sort of specialist cloud user and you're into the benefits, the messaging, push messages, alarms, visualizing and stuff like that through the cloud, then you'll be able to pick up the logo and run with it, no problems. But that's not to say that it's too complex for a beginner. So if you have no experience of clouds, as I have done recently, get yourself a free Amazon Web Services cloud account and you will be good to go. Once this product is launched, you'll be able to connect the logo into your cloud and start to use these benefits straight away. The use of our existing IT infrastructures is another big plus. So if I want remote access to a logo at the moment, I either have to do some jiggery pokery with my IT people in the network, or I have to start fitting external modules. As long as I've got an internet connection available at the Ethernet port of the logo, then I'm good to go and good to connect to the cloud. So this again gives us really good flexibility, whether it be in the applicative use. As you can see, there are a few that we've thrown together there just to give you some ideas of remote systems. You know, vending machines used to be a really big area for logo. I can see this picking back up because now we've got this cloud connectivity, and there are other things coming along on the back end of this as well, moving into the future that will enable that to become much simpler to establish the connection. So good coverage, whether you're a beginner, whether you're a specialist, everybody can benefit from this cloud connectivity with the logo. To identify a version 8.3 logo, there will be a change to the part numbers. So currently you can see here that all the version 8.2 logos have 08 on the middle part of the part number and ending 0 on the final part of the part number. The version 8.3 logos, the 08 will be maintained, but will increment the last digit to be a 1 rather than a 0. So you'll straight away be able to tell which version of logo base module you've got, and obviously clearer for ordering. Now, not forgetting that all of these new version 8.3 modules, once they are released, will be available for use with the existing range of expansion modules for version 8 logo. So it's a very quick and simple swap out if you want to expand your capabilities and your functionalities of your machine. Just before we do finish, there are a number of links. The slide deck will be made available. If you do want it, drop me an email. My contact details are coming up again at the end of the slideshow, so you can take a note of those and I can send you this out. But basically, if you remember siemens.com/logo, you can get access to all of the free web-based training, the video tutorials. You can download the demo software, get access to our starter kit information, and lots of application examples. So real worthwhile, siemens.com/logo. Have a look on there and get familiar with it and the benefits that that can bring to you. And then just before we do finish, I'm just going to jump back out, and there is a small chance that I can show you now live logo in the cloud. I'll attempt to connect. So we have our colleague Helmut in headquarters has a logo actually sat in his home office now, connected to the Amazon cloud, and has given us a link here so that we can have a play, because along with the logo web editor version 2, not only do you get the capability to upload to the cloud, but you also have the capability to configure some new objects, and one of those you can see, or two of those you can see on the screen now. So this is actually what you're seeing is web pages hosted in the cloud, so you can see it's not my IP address of my logo. They're hosted in the Amazon cloud with a connection down to a real logo, and we can therefore access that wherever we've got the URL and the password. We can jump in, have a look, and access the logo's control system. So you can see a couple of the new objects. One of them, we did just configure the bar chart, which is a vertical analog signal. We're going to, with the version 2, have access to a nice rainbow dial, as it's called. So again, you can see some colors settings here. You'll be able to set the limits around these for your different alarming set points. And if I just change the value that we see in here, this is actually through the cloud now, sending a value back down to the logo in the office. It'll just refresh once that's been accepted. And there we go. You can see that value's being changed. The dial's reflecting that with the colours. So again, a nice dial. I think it's very much more a dashboard type dial and something that we're more used to. As I change that signal, you may have noticed below we've got this trend view, which changed the signal there on one of the analogs that we're monitoring. So we've got this new trend view that will be available in the web editor version 2. We can use a ruler to read the values. You can actually click on a zoom view. Not sure if this is going to, yeah, so there we've now zoomed in to the trend view, and you can have a look at that in more detail. Let's come back out of that. So again, a couple of nice features there with the new web editor. I do seem to have lost my menu, but not to worry, you get the idea. So this is logo web page is now hosted in the Amazon cloud, and that is probably one of the very few first live demos that people have seen. So that brings us to the end of the webinar. I hope that you've found some use from what we've discussed and what we've shown you today, even if it's just to trigger ideas in your head. If you want more information and detail, follow me on LinkedIn. I'm always posting content out on there relating to the products of CTOP power supplies, logo controllers and the S7-1200, as well as our broader portfolio of hardware and software. And there also is my email address, so feel free to contact me if you'd like more information. And at that point, I can open up to questions. If anybody has a question, feel free to open up your microphone and ask away, and we'll see if we can